Well, welcome back to what's supposed to be the final day of COP26 here in Glasgow, although there's quite a likelihood that it might extend into the weekend as they try and reach agreement. Well, joining me now is Simon Mundy. He's the moral money editor at the Financial Times and the author of The Race for Tomorrow, which is a book he wrote after spending the past 2 years on a road trip around the world in the lead up to COP26. What were you trying to find out when you travel around the world?
For me, I was drawn to this as a reporter rather than as an activist. I was simply thinking, this is the biggest story of the century for any journalist of my generation. What's going on? Because I know that this is not simply a thing about the future, it's a thing about the present, seeing how people are responding to it. So I realized the only way to do that was to go on quite a long journey to a large number of different countries and see what was happening. So I spent time with illegal mammoth tusk hunters in Siberia. I spent time with Prince Abdulaziz, the energy minister of Saudi Arabia, winemakers in Chile, cobalt miners in Congo. And all of them, they're incredibly disparate in their backgrounds and their way of life, but all of them are actually playing a part in what I would see as a single story, which is the story of humanity's facing up to the realization that we've been changing our environment in some very dangerous ways, and we have to fundamentally change our economy and our economic system as a whole to deal with it.
I mean, that's the point. You found that people were willing to change, recognize there was a problem, and even in, very remote and difficult lifestyles, they wanted to change them.
Yeah, well, it's simply people don't have a choice. So Saudi Arabia, which I mentioned, for example, I mean, Saudi Arabia would love, I'm sure, to keep on doing things as they are, but they recognize that the energy market is changing in response to climate change. So they are moving as fast as they can to future-proof themselves because they realize that's the way things are going. Herders in Mongolia, who I met in the winter. The winters in Mongolia are getting more extreme because of melting ice in the Arctic. It's changing the movement of moisture and heat energy. So the herders in Mongolia, they have no choice but to try and adapt to this, to try to find ways to deal with this extreme cold. And then you have people like the cobalt miners in Congo. I went down inside one of these informal cobalt mines, which was a pretty extreme experience. These guys do it every day, all day. Why? It's driven largely by the booming demand for electric vehicles. Cobalt is an indispensable ingredient in the batteries. And so if you want to make money in Kolwezi, this town in southeastern Congo that I visited, that's how you do it. So these very, very different people from all over the world, they are all responding to this enormous series of changes, this cascading wave of changes.
But, I mean, are we going to go on predating and using up the planet's resources, do you think, unfairly, disproportionately?
We will, as long as we have the current economic system. You and I have incentives to act in a way that is not conducive with minimizing climate change. In fact, that's the whole system within which we live. We don't have a price on carbon. And this is something that seems quite technical to some people, but fundamentally we have a market failure at the moment. People don't have the right incentives to stop predating, as you say. If we change the incentives, we change the rules within which we operate, then actually it could be different, but that requires much more ambitious action from governments and from society as a whole.
But the sort of things they're talking about here, are you seeing at least signs of those rules starting to change?
No, I'm not. It's been striking to me to speak to a very wide range of different people here. I've been speaking to a lot of business leaders. I've also been speaking to some of this incredible generation of young climate activists who have totally transformed the global climate conversation over the past few years. And they are so much more ambitious, realistically ambitious. They're not asking for things that are impossible. They're asking for things that are ambitious and that match the scale of the challenge with which we are confronted. On my travels, I went to places where people have been dying already, and people will die in larger and larger numbers. This is really serious. And the young activists that I've been meeting, many of them from the Global South, not enough people from the Global South are here, but many of them from the Global South who are here have very powerful perspectives, and they have what I consider the appropriate level of ambition. And they talk about systemic change, not doing what we can within the current system, not sort of flying less and eating less meat only and doing things within the existing system. We do have to change the system because we are playing a very, very dangerous game with the environmental system.
And what are the changes to the system?
Well, I think first and foremost, put a price on carbon. Yeah. You know, this is simply, it sounds ridiculously simple, and that's because actually, you know, conceptually, it's a very basic market failure that we have. There is an economic cost to the carbon that you and I and all of us emit, directly or indirectly, through our activities. And we're not currently paying that cost. It's being paid by people, including some of the people I met during my research for the book. mainly in the developing world. They are paying the cost. We have to change the system to reflect that. It's not going to be easy. It's a complicated thing to do, but it's possible. Look at what humanity has achieved. I think we can establish a carbon price.
I would agree with you. Why haven't we done it, though?
Well, there are many reasons, right? And I don't know them all. I would say one is that there are a lot of people who are benefiting very handsomely from the current system, who have incentives not to shake things up too much. Fossil fuel money is everywhere. Some of it goes into my salary and yours through the advertising that the FT or Sky have, either from energy companies or from banks. So it's everywhere, and that is the system that we operate in. So there are incentives for all sorts of people not to change the system too much, and also because it is ambitious. It's not going to be easy. It requires all sorts of international coordination, and often we've seen politicians shying away from that sort of tough action.
We're probably going to see that here. Simon Mundy, thank you very much indeed for joining us. His book is called Race for Tomorrow.